Hi guys, thanks for visiting my channel. Today we are going to be doing the cranberry ketchup take 2. For those of you who missed my post, I did do cranberry ketchup and I filmed it, and as I was ladling it in my jars, I'm thinking, this is pretty thick. So I started to edit my video and then I got to thinking, I wonder what that's going to be like after it's canned up. So I opened one of my jars and sure enough, just as I suspected, it was thicker than I anticipated going in the jar, and once it had been canned, it was super thick. So just to give you an idea of what happened, I'm going to show you, plus it'll give you a nice laugh. See that? It's like that cranberry jelly that people like to eat at Thanksgiving time. It's certainly not what I would call ketchup, so no way you could dip it. So back to the drawing board. So anyway, I apologize for the delay of this video. I know some of you were waiting for me to get it done, and because of the holiday, it's kind of thrown me off schedule with things. So I apologize, but I'm gonna get it done today for you. The recipe we're going to use is from Ball's website, Ball Fresh Preserving, from their website. Now, I did find another recipe in my Not Your Mama's canning book for cranberry ketchup. I didn't want to do this one because she uses fresh orange juice, and I didn't really want a cranberry orange flavor. I feel like we've done plenty of that this season, so I kind of shied away from this recipe. However, I do like, I took some of her technique, I guess, some of her how-to, the way she did hers. I like it better than Ball's. I'm not sure, because I did follow the instructions exactly. So I'm not sure how they didn't experience the same thing I experienced, and it doesn't matter. Ball says to cook it for 30 minutes or until almost the texture of commercial ketchup. Well, after I pureed my berries and put it in my stock pot to cook it for the 30 minutes, I'm thinking this is already almost the texture of a commercial ketchup. So I thought, but they know what they're doing, so then this is supposedly a tested recipe, so I just went ahead and cooked it for the 30 minutes, and you see the results. So her method is, and she also does something a little bit different, that a step that I am going to skip, because she also presses hers through a fine mesh sieve. We already have several steps to this because you have to run all this through a blender or a food processor with a metal blade. So I'm trying to eliminate that. Plus, I don't care if my ketchup has a little bit of texture, but I do want it to be like a dipping sauce. Ketchup is something that you dip. So I'm not going to run it through a fine mesh sieve like she recommends, but she only brings hers up to a boil after you puree it and then add your other ingredients. She just brings it up to a boil and then she cans it. So that's what we're going to do, but we are going to use the recipe from the Ball canning book. Now, she does have at the bottom of her recipe, she does have a cook's notes section, and apparently she has experienced this issue, and she said if you find your ketchup is setting up firmly like a jelly, you can add equal parts vinegar and water to thin it out as it is boiling. Just be sure to add a small amount at a time and always return the mixture to a boil before jarring it. So apparently she has experienced some of what I experienced. So I'm not sure why Ball doesn't make any note of that, but anyway, that can be an issue. So that is an option. I don't think we're going to need to do that. From my experience the first time, I just don't think we need to cook it for the 30 minutes. A couple other things that I do want to mention about the ketchup is Ball states that it's a delicious sweet and tangy condiment that tastes remarkably similar to a popular British steak sauce. It goes particularly well with meat pies and egg dishes. So I know I have some of you who follow me from the UK, so I wanted to bring that up, that they do say that it's similar to your British steak sauce, which I believe is referred to as brown sauce. And then in another canning website called Healthy Canning, and they are a great resource, you guys. If you are not familiar with them, you might want to give their website a look. They have a lot of great recipes and they stick to all the rules. So on their website, they do use Ball's Cranberry Ketchup recipe, and they add some other notes to it that I think you guys might be interested in, so bear with me here. Let's see, they find it similar in flavor to the popular British steak sauce, meaning HP sauce. So those of you from the UK should know what that means, or just as the British call it, brown sauce. While the resident in-house British experts here don't necessarily agree, we have included a few tips in the notes section for helping you to push it more in that direction. And their tips for pushing it in that direction are to use malt vinegar instead of apple cider vinegar. Ball recommends apple cider vinegar, but technically you can use any vinegar that you want as long as it's 5% acidity. So if you want to push it towards the English brown sauce, you might want to use malt vinegar instead. Add a tablespoon or so of kitchen Bouquet. If you're not familiar with that, that's this little guy here. I use this all the time to bump up gravies, and anytime I'm doing, usually it's a beef dish. It's delicious in beef stew, beef gravy, that kind of thing. So it adds a lot of flavor, but that's what they're referring to, that you can add some of that to make it more like the English brown sauce. And they also recommend adding a tablespoon or two of molasses. So if you're from the UK and you want to make something that's a little closer to your brown sauce over there, I encourage you to give those few tips a try. And then for those of you who are concerned about sugar, because this recipe has 3 cups of lightly packed brown sugar, so it does have a lot of sugar, which ketchup typically does, you can substitute the same volume amount of Splenda or 3 teaspoons of liquid stevia. They recommend better stevia, liquid stevia. So I know this question has come up several times on my channel. Can I switch out, substitute a sweetener for the sugar in a recipe? And yes, it is safe for canning using Splenda or liquid stevia. So I think that that is a great option as well. So the other note that they make on the Healthy Canning website, which I thought was really interesting, I was not familiar with this. Those of you who are from Australia and New Zealand, and I know I have a few of you as well, be aware of your vinegar. Apparently the vinegar that you all get over there is 4% acidity unless it specifically states 5% acidity. So make sure that whatever vinegar you're purchasing does state that it is 5% acidity. And again, this recipe calls for apple cider, but you are fine to swap that out for any vinegar that's 5% acidity. So let's get started. What I have here that I've started with is 11 cups of fresh cranberries. You could also use frozen, and I just rinsed them and sorted through them to make sure there weren't any bad ones, and put them in my stock pot. And to that we're going to add 1.5 cups of water, and then we are going to add 2 cups of chopped onion and 5 cloves of chopped garlic. Now, a word on this as well. Ball never talks about this, or I haven't come across it on their website, but my Amish canning book mentions it, and the National Center for Home Food Preservation mentions it. Anytime that you are water bath canning, which we are going to water bath can this, and you are adding low acid foods, onions and garlic are a low acid food, but we are acidifying that with the vinegar. Anytime that you are doing that, please follow a tested recipe. Because if you decide, oh, I really love onion, and you add 4 cups of onion and you stick with the 1 cup of vinegar that's in this recipe, you could throw off the pH level in your jar. So it's really important when you are water bath canning and adding low acid food that you stick to a tested recipe so that you don't have an issue with a safety issue by throwing off the pH level in your jar. So just a word on that. Like I said, Ball never mentions it that I have found, but my Amish canning book does, and the National Center for Home Food Preservation certainly does. And I believe it's in their section where there's salsas, so you can confirm what I'm saying under salsas, because salsas are tomatoes, but you add a lot of low acid foods like the onions and the peppers and all that, but you're re-acidifying it with the vinegar. And they do have a note in there about don't change the amounts of the low acid foods that you're adding when you're water bath canning. So you can confirm that there. Anyway, like I said, 2 cups of chopped onions, 5 cloves of chopped garlic, and we are going to bring this up to a medium-high heat, and we're going to bring it to a boil, and we're going to frequently stir it until all of our cranberries start to pop open and break down a bit. I'm going to bring you in close so you can see what's going on in my pot. Okay guys, our cranberries are starting to burst open. And just like I said, you want to make sure that you're stirring it frequently during this part. There's not a whole lot of water in there, so you don't want them to burn on the bottom. So make sure you're stirring frequently, and we're just going to keep going until they start to break down. Okay guys, our cranberries have broken down and our onions are pretty soft, so we are ready to move on to the next step, which is going to be pureeing. Okay guys, we're ready to puree. So I turned my heat off, and what we're going to do is we're going to take a couple scoops of our cranberries here, and you're going to ladle them into a blender or a food processor. You just want to make sure whatever you're using has a metal blade. And since this mixture is hot, and I know this because I've done soup many times this way, and if you haven't experienced it, when something's hot and you puree it, the lid wants to come off while you are processing. So I always use a kitchen towel across the top and hold it down securely to make sure that that doesn't happen. And you want to make sure that you are pureeing this until it's pretty smooth. We want our ketchup to be as smooth as we can get it without having to put it through a fine mesh sieve. However, that is an option. If you want to do the extra step, you don't have to worry so much about getting your pureed mixture super smooth if you're going to press it through a sieve. I'm not, so I'm going to work really hard to make sure that I am getting a good smooth texture. Okay, we are ready to add our other ingredients to our ketchup. We've got our puree here. Isn't it a beautiful color? Love that. So you want to add all of your cranberry puree back to your pot. And mine turned out pretty smooth. It almost looks like ketchup already, which is what I was thinking the first time. Now it is gonna be a little more liquidy once we add our vinegar, but still. So I'm going to add 1 cup of apple cider vinegar, and then we are going to add 3 cups of lightly packed brown sugar, or your sugar substitute, whichever. We're going to add a teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of black pepper. This is where I differ with Ball's flavor profile just a little bit. They said to add 2 teaspoons of ground mustard. I'm going to add 3. For me, 2 wasn't enough. But that's up to you. Use your own discretion. And then we need, their recipe calls for a whole teaspoon of ground cloves. I and my husband both agree that it felt overpowering, almost perfumey, but that's just our opinion. So the recipe does say 1 teaspoon. I'm only going to go with a half this time, because I felt, maybe even a quarter, because I felt like that was just way too much of that flavor. And then we need a half of a teaspoon of ground allspice, which is about what I have left in that little jar. And we also need a half of a teaspoon of cayenne pepper. You could leave that out. One other thing that I'm going to add, because I think it adds a lot of flavor and some depth, is some Worcestershire, but that's not called for in the recipe. So I'm just going to add a couple of teaspoons of Worcestershire. And then we are going to put this on a medium heat, and we're going to bring it up to a boil. Now this is where they said to cook it for 30 minutes, and this is where I felt like I got into trouble. So, and I'm going to bring you in close so you can see what I'm talking about. I'm just going to let this cook long enough that it comes up to a boil, and then we're going to can it. And I'm going to bring you in close and let you see why. It just gets too thick. Those cranberries have a lot of natural pectin in them, and they really want to gel and firm up. So I don't want that to happen to me again. Once was enough. So, and you could tell when I bring you in close, you're going to see that this is already almost the texture of a commercial ketchup. A little bit runnier than that, so it's almost there. So what we're going to do is we're just going to bring this up to a boil, and while that is happening, I'm going to bring you in close so you can see what I'm talking about. I'm going to taste it for flavor and make sure I don't want to add anything else to it, and I'm going to get my jars and my canner ready. Okay guys, we're not up to a boil yet, but I wanted you to see just how thick this is already. See that? It's already got some really nice body to it, and I don't think we want any more. So I'm going to I'm not going to cook this for 30 minutes. I'm just going to bring it up to a boil, and then we're going to can it up, because that pectin is going to sit in as this cools, and it's going to thicken up on its own. So that's where I am with it. You can kind of use your own judgment. But my experience with cranberries is all of that pectin will tighten this up on its own as it cools. So I'm just going to bring it up to a boil so that it's ready for canning, and then we're going to can it up. Okay guys, here we go. We're ready for canning. We are going to be canning in 1/2 pint or 1 cup jars, which is typically your jelly jars. Ball does not give any instructions, and neither do the other sources for canning in pints, so I'm not even sure where to go with that. So we are going to do the 1 cup 1/2 pint jars. Modern canning guidelines state that if you're going to be canning for 10 minutes or more, you do not need to pre-sterilize your jars and lids. Just make sure they're nice and clean, and keep your jars hot in hot water. And they are, mine are in hot water in my sink. They've been deeply cleaned and they are ready to go, and I've also washed my lids and set them aside. So we're ready to get things going. We are going to look for 1/2 inch headspace, and we are going to be canning for 15 minutes. So let's grab a couple of jars. And I brought my ketchup just up to a boil, and I think that that is going to be good. This is way better than last time. And I tasted it. I did add a little extra salt, so make sure you give it a taste before you can it up. Make sure it's where you want it to be. And 1/2 inch headspace. And then once you get to 1/2 inch headspace, you're going to debubble. So just poke your jars a little bit with either a debubbling tool, or you can use a chopstick. Just don't use anything metal. And then I'm going to use a paper towel dipped in white vinegar to make sure I get my rim really clean. We don't want anything to interfere with a seal. And we are going to center our lids. And then we are going to add our rings, fingertip tight. I did want to mention that you're going to either be water bath canning or steam canning. I am steam canning, and I need my lift to get my lifter. Anyway, if you're water bath canning, you want to make sure you have enough water to cover your jars by 1 to 2 inches, and you want that water to be simmering. For steam canning like I'm doing, you need about 3 quarts of water in the bottom of your steam can or simmering as well. And I have done that. And we should get about 8 jars. Okay, I got 8 jars and some change. I'm probably gonna get closer to 9 jars, but that's okay. I'm gonna leave that out so I can show it to you. So now we're going to put the lid on our canner, whether you're water bath canning or if you're steam canning, put the lid on your canner, crank it up to high heat. We're gonna bring it up to temperature. For water bath canning, that means a full rolling boil. And if you're using a steam canner, you should have a gauge on it that will tell you when you are in your green zone. Once we get there, we'll start our timer for 15 minutes. Okay guys, I am up to temperature, so I'm ready to start timing. If you're water bath canning, make sure it's a full rolling boil. We are going to hit our timer for 15 minutes. And then when our 15 minutes are up, I'm going to turn the heat off and remove the lid, wait 5 minutes, and then we can remove our jars. I do want to mention, I always try to remind you guys of this, you do not want to leave it on a high heat. You do not want it boiling that vigorously. So always make sure you turn it down enough just so that it maintains a full rolling boil for water bath canning. And in the case of steam canning, you want to make sure that your dial gauge is just within the green zone, just inside of the green zone are the instructions for that. So I've adjusted my heat and we're gonna go our 15 minutes and then I'll bring you back. Okay guys, we are all done. Time to see our delicious cranberry ketchup. Wasn't too hard, right? It takes a few steps, but it's really not bad, and even pureeing it is not hard to do. I didn't really mind that step. Just make sure that you use a towel on top because it is hot and it tends to want to lift the lid. Give you a close-up. Such a pretty color, and it really is quite tasty. Now I told you I was going to save some out, and I did. This is almost room temperature, not quite, but I wanted to show you the texture. I think that the way I did it this time is going to be absolutely perfect. See, it's a little tiny bit loose, but that's going to thicken up even more as it continues to cool. So for me, that's perfect, but you can see the texture is really nice. It's pretty smooth. There's a tiny bit of texture to it from just pureeing the cranberries and not putting them through a sieve. But like I said, if you want to take the extra step and push it through a fine mesh sieve, that will give you a perfectly smooth sauce, but honestly, I don't think it's needed. It is very tasty. I'm kind of glad that it didn't work out last time because I did make some adjustments this time. I like the Worcestershire in it, and I like less cloves. I think that the cloves, just that whole teaspoon, just really overpowered the cranberries, and like I said, tasted almost perfumey, but that's just a personal preference, so I'll let that be your discretion. Also, if you were interested in the version with the orange, she uses 2 cups of orange juice in hers, but you might want to give her book a look and try her recipe with the orange in it. But honestly, like I said, I think we've done enough cranberry orange for the season, so this is perfect. It would be great in meatloaf. It would be great dipping chicken nuggets. It's delicious dipping sweet potato fries, but you could use regular fries. Any place you would use ketchup. I also thought it would be delicious stirred into a regular barbecue sauce to give it kind of a holiday flair, jazz it up a little bit, make it something special. And it's gonna make great gifts. So I hope you'll give this a try. So I appreciate you so much waiting. I'm sorry that it took me extra time, but the Thanksgiving holiday did push things back a few days. So anyway, and my mistake, too, or the way it turned out, not really a mistake, but the way it happened the first time put me off schedule, but we're back on track. But I do want to say that this wraps up our holiday canning, but not our holiday fun. I'm going to be sharing some more delicious holiday recipes with you, some appetizers and some breakfast ideas, and some more things between now and Christmas, some cookies and maybe some candy. So I have a lot going on, but this does wrap up our canning session until next year. So I have another year to plan some yummy things for you for next season, and I'll try to start it a little bit earlier because this has really been fun. It wasn't something that I really intended. It kind of just evolved into holiday canning sessions, which was kind of fun. So I enjoyed that. Give me some feedback. Leave me a comment in the comment section if you enjoyed the holiday canning sessions, and if you want more of that next year, leave me a comment and let me know. Like, subscribe, and share, and I will see you next time. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Have a great day.